Thank you. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here with you in this lovely congregation. I'm deeply grateful to you for your sustaining support of our work at the United Nations. I also must express my deep gratitude and fond remembrance of Hetty Frank and her devotion to peace and the work that we do together to create the beloved world community. Hans and all of us here together continue this work. Happy International Women's Day. Gender equity produces better policies and decisions. Therefore, all of us need to support gender equity. I'm concerned that I don't see women in leadership positions nationally or internationally combating the coronavirus. That causes me concern. So let me ask all of you, do you know that you have an office at the United Nations? Good, that's better than it is out on the West Coast when I ask that question. We've been around, we've been at the United Nations for 57 years, and in that time we helped found Religions for Peace. We headed the faith-based caucus for the establishment of the International Criminal Court, and we started the United Nations being concerned about sexual orientation and gender identity human rights. We have an outsized influence at the United Nations by building effective coalitions with faith-based and secular organizations. Our spring seminar theme last year was gender equity. This year the theme is climate justice. Please keep in touch with us. We are evaluating whether we want to have this as an in-person seminar or a virtual seminar, again, thinking about the coronavirus. I want to begin my talk with perhaps the best book I've ever read on bigotry and racism, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I don't want to give too much away, but the author deeply discusses bigotry based on race, gender, and all other forms of racism and bigotry. He begins his discussion of gender with the wedding of his parents. And I'm quoting, "It was early August 1976, the Tuesday before the Saturday my parents were scheduled to wed. Running down the ceremony, Pastor Winfrey Quimby recited the Christian wedding vows for my parents. Husbands, love your wives, and wives, obey your husbands." "I'm not obeying him," Ma interjected. "What?" Pastor Quimby said in shock, turning to look at my father. "What?" Dad said, turning to look at my mother. "The only man I obeyed was my father when I was a child," she nearly shouted, staring into my dad's eyes. "You are not my father, and I am not a child." Ibram's dad proposed, "How about are we willing to submit one to another?" Mother agreed, and she had been rethinking Christian sexism, and she rejected the patriarchal ideal. Black queer activists, too, had been marginalized after, and I'm quoting here, by the way, marginalized after they launched the gay liberation movement. Frances Beale audaciously proclaimed in her 1968 book, "The black women in America can justly be described as a slave of a slave, the victim of the double jeopardy of sexism and racism. Intersectional black identities are subjected to what Crenshaw describes as the intersection of racism and other forms of bigotry, such as ethnocentrism, colorism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia." Kendi writes, "My journey to being an anti-racist first recognized the intersectionality of my ethnic racism, then my bodily racism, then my cultural racism, and then my color racism, and then my class racism, and when I entered graduate school, my gender racism and queer racism." I want you to read this book, and I don't have time to read the whole thing to you here. I hope I've established that sexism and racism exist, and both are wrong and need to be defeated. I know in this country and in many others, The feminine in general are relegated to inferior status, of inferior in pay and responsibility and in all aspects of life. We pay a heavy price for this marginalization. All of us suffer no matter what our gender, because when any of us is excluded or marginalized, we all suffer. Together with people of color, women and the feminine are everywhere subjected to violence. Wherever the feminine appears, there is irrational violence. Violence against women has increased in the United States and around the world. The FBI has reported something like a 20% increase in rape in the United States. I want to spend most of the rest of my time talking about 6 women who've had a big impact on my life, and I'm going to start with Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I was posted at the American Consulate General there. My mother sent me $20 to give to Mother Teresa. I thought, okay, that's not enough. I'll give another $20, a whole $40. And I sent a nice note off with the driver to the Mother House. And when I got to my apartment that evening, I heard the phone ringing. So I, tried to open the door, unlock the door, grab the phone before whoever it was hung up. And it was Mother Teresa. Not somebody calling on her behalf. It was Mother Teresa herself. She said, there was a very nice note. Can I meet you, she says. I said, yes, of course. She said, can you come down to the Mother House at 10 o'clock tomorrow? I said, sure. So I went down there, and I spent a solid hour with her holding my hand, and I knew at the time she was a saint. I didn't need the Catholic Church to tell me she was a saint. And we talked. She had an agenda. She always had an agenda. The United States government has a policy of reciprocating visa prices. And so the Indian government was charging $100 for a visa for people visiting India, so the United States also charged $100 for a 5-year multiple entry visa. And she said, I'm sending my nuns to America to take care of dying AIDS patients, which, by the way, your government is not taking care of, And she says, I don't think people like your mother give their $20 or $40 and expect me to turn that over to the US government so I can take care of dying AIDS patients in America. I said, okay, I will do what I can. I can't guarantee anything, but I'll try my best to see if I can change that. And then I said, is there anything I can do for you personally? And I expected her to ask me to write another check. And she said, I want you to go to my home for the dying and do volunteer work. And I go, oh. It's like the last thing I wanted to do. But because Mother Teresa asked me to do it, of course I went, and it was actually a beautiful, rewarding experience. It's how she got her start in Calcutta. She could not stand people dying in the gutters in the streets of Calcutta, and she thought, bring them to her ashram, and at least they would die with dignity. And what actually happened in some cases, because they were getting fed and they were being taken care of, some of them revived and continued to live. Others did pass away, but they passed away in a place that they were loved and cared for, and I was honored to participate in that. So then I went to the consul, the visa officer, Catherine Burke, and I said, we need to give Mother Teresa's nuns free visas so they can take care of dying AIDS patients in America. And Catherine Burke said, let Elizabeth Taylor take care of the dying AIDS patients. I said, okay, fine. So I go to my office. A couple of weeks later, my secretary comes into my office, and she said, Bruce. I said, what? And she said, you have a visitor downstairs. I said, who the hell is it now? She said, it's Mother Teresa. I go, oh my God. So I brought Mother Teresa up to my office, and she sat on the couch, and then I called Catherine Burke. I said, you know that stuff you were telling me about Elizabeth Taylor and stuff? I have Mother Teresa in my office. Come and tell her yourself. So Catherine Burke came up, and within minutes, Mother Teresa had Catherine Burke wrapped around her finger. Both of us went to the Consul General, Ron Lorton, and Mother Teresa got free visas until the next Consul General came in and said we couldn't do that anymore. But several of her nuns did get visas without the visa fee. Much more to tell, but not enough time. My next person was also a Catholic nun. Both these women have passed away. Sister Joan Kirby. And when I got to the UN, she was one of the first people I met. And in the beginning, I was kind of scared of her. She gave me the nun look, you know the nun look, that's the nun look. And she thought I was this upstart person coming in trying to shake up the UN basically about LGBT rights. And then all of a sudden, she flipped. She decided to be on my side. And she started asking people that were organizing a conference in Paris to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which, by the way, there are copies in the back in the welcome table, so you should read it. And we were there, and I wanted LGBT rights to be on the agenda. We were talking about the Dalits in India, the Roma in Europe. We were talking about the human rights of everybody you could think of, and not a word about LGBT human rights, sexual orientation, gender identity human rights. And I kept raising my hand. And then Sister Joan Kirby came around, and she said, "What are you going to do for Bruce's LGBT people?" So they became my people, And eventually I got the first workshop in the 60-year history of these conferences to discuss LGBT issues. And then at the last minute when I was in Paris, Sister Joan said, "Come and be on this big meeting, a big roundtable discussion with hundreds of people in the audience." And so I spoke there. And afterwards there was a Monsignor from the Vatican, and he grabbed me and he pulled me into a corner. He kind of scared me. And he said, "I just want to tell you, I'm gay and I support everything you're doing." Okay, all right. And then I was at Charles de Gaulle Airport on my way home, and there were a bunch of Catholic nuns from Boston. They were loud. You ever met any Catholic nuns from Boston? They can be loud. And so they start shouting across the airport. They said, "Are you the guy who was talking about gay rights at the conference?" I said, "Yes." They said, "Good on you. Keep up the good work." All right, my next woman is Queen Mother Esther. Some of you know about our Every Child is Our Child program in Ghana. She started it. And she basically saw these orphan children that had been orphaned by HIV/AIDS, and she took it into her hands to get the women of the community to start taking care of these orphan children. And when we got there, she told us what we could do to help, which is basically help them to get books and supplies for school. And we've been doing that since 2005. And she was very much in charge. Later, she became blind, and she was still in charge. And she says, I lost my sight. I didn't lose my brains. I'm still in charge. And she definitely was. Unfortunately, she has also passed away. But these three women that I've just outlined have overcome tremendous obstacles of their religion or their societies, which want to keep women down, and yet they rose above the society and the religion. My fourth woman is Pauline Park. She's a member of All Souls Church in New York. The next three women, by the way, are still alive. She's a trans woman, and she went, if you look at her, and she went to the bathroom in Manhattan Mall. And if you look at her, the only bathroom you would see her going into would be the women's bathroom. So that's what she did. And she was arrested. And she took the city of New York to court for using the proper bathroom for her. And she won the case, and it's because of her now women and now trans people in New York City can go to the bathroom that's appropriate for them. She also, quite controversially, in our polity, she is a Unitarian Universalist, but she's a big advocate for Palestinian rights. And not everybody is very happy with that, but she advocates for that. And I bring her to the UN all the time to advocate for trans rights. She's one of my go-to people. The next is Leslie Udwin. She is a force of nature. You may have seen a documentary called India's Daughter. Terrible story about this young medical student. She'd worked her way up from poverty. She had gone through medical school. She'd just gotten her doctorate, was ready to become a community health doctor. She asked her boyfriend, said, "Take me to, I want to celebrate. I've just graduated, and let's go to a movie." So they go to the movie, and after the movie is out, it's dark, and there's a small minibus. And they said, "Are you going to our neighborhood?" And the minibus said yes, and they got in. They beat the guy up, and they raped her to death. And it was ugly. I won't go into the details, but it was awful. She did not die immediately. It took days, and she finally died in hospital. And Leslie wanted to do a documentary on this, and she talked to the rapists who were caught and convicted and sentenced to death, and to their lawyers, and they had no remorse. They basically said she was a bad girl, she was out after dark without her parents, she deserved what she got. And Leslie came away from that documentary film feeling they were programmed that way. They don't even really know what they're thinking here. They don't, they're programmed that way. So she has started a curriculum, and we've gone around the world together. Actually, she and her husband and me and my husband went to Hanoi, Vietnam, and spoke at the American Embassy there. We had people from the Ministry of Education, and she started this curriculum called Think Equal. And it starts teaching children from the age of 3, because we learn bigotry that early. So starting with the age of 3 to teach people to think equal. Men and women are equal, black, white, equal, gay, straight, equal, we're all equal. It's now been adopted by the government of Sri Lanka as part of their national curriculum. Many schools in Canada have adopted it. Botswana has adopted it. Kenya has adopted it. It's growing around the world. If you want to learn more about Leslie Edwin, just Google Think Equal and you'll find all about her. And the last one is Master Chen Yen. She's a Buddhist Dharma master, and she started with pennies from housewives to feed the poor. She now has a foundation, the Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation. They're in 100 countries around the world, have offices in 57 countries around the world, and she's also, it's a woman-led foundation in a religion, in Buddhism, that doesn't really give women much responsibility. So it's all these women are remarkable, and I could tell you much more about all of them, but I don't have time. I want to say a word about sexual orientation, gender identity, human rights. These rights are in danger around the world. We are not going forward, we're going backwards. I have particular concerns about 3 members of the European Union, Hungary, Romania, and Poland. And also Hungary and Romania is where we have some of our Unitarian brothers and sisters, so that's a concern. And make no mistake that all human rights are connected. Any attack on anybody's human rights is an attack on us all. We must defend the human rights of all, and if we don't defend each other's human rights, we're going to be picked off one by one until all of us lose our rights. Russia is a chief enemy of human rights, particularly at the United Nations. Vladimir Putin's claim to legitimate authority rests on his pledge to restore traditional Russian family values with the support of the Russian Orthodox Church. We are in communication with Orthodox theologians. We're going to do a webinar, and we're basically going to expose how the Russian Orthodox Church is contributing to bigotry, but also to plot a route out of that, where traditional Russian Orthodox and all kinds of Orthodox Christianity can turn around and talk about kindness and tolerance for everyone. The term of the United Nations expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, his term was extended by only a margin of only 1 vote. That's very unusual. Usually these independent experts get their terms by acclamation, but it shows the tension at the United Nations about sexual orientation, gender identity issues. The American government used to be a defender of human rights, and we could depend on the American Embassy at the United Nations to help us with human rights. They're absent. They're not even there. So with that, I will end, but I do want your support, and you're going to have a chance to support us today, so thank you very much.